Hello everybody, how are you guys doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel. And today I want to have a discussion around Metroid Prime 4 and the expectations I think that we should have going into the eventual reveal of that game. Now, this is a topic I wanted to talk about because I feel like it's pretty relevant to some of the things we're seeing happening right now surrounding Tears of the Kingdom and everyone's expectations surrounding that game for many, many months before it released, as well as a bit of a response and an addition to the last video that I made discussing Pikmin 4. It's interesting when we look back on Tears of the Kingdom because that is a game that, as we saw more and more of it going back to the end of 2022, and then, of course, the first kind of half of the year in 2023 leading up to the game's release, we saw more trailers, we saw gameplay demonstrations, we had the art book get leaked, we got confirmation that the game was going to be selling for $70. All of these things were a big deal, and they started to paint a bit of a picture on what people could expect from the game. And as a lot of us know, many conversations and debates that came out of all of this slow trickling out of information and trailers and gameplay came the debate on if this game was actually living up to the idea of being a true sequel to Breath of the Wild as opposed to maybe feeling like DLC. And a part of, I think, the defense of Tears of the Kingdom being a sequel is the fact that most sequels look and play similarly to the game that precedes it. So it was almost as if people were forgetting that a game that's a sequel to Breath of the Wild was going to look similar. It's using the same kind of art style and a similar graphics engine, but they're going to evolve concepts. They're going to evolve the gameplay and change things up. They're going to change the world. They're going to make the addition of the sky. And of course, the story will be different. It'll be building off of the events of the prior game and doing something new. That's what a typical sequel does. And a weird thing that happened during all of this marketing for Tears of the Kingdom was a lot of people, not everybody mind you, but a lot of people who seemed to kind of allow themselves to forget that that's what sequels do. They're not completely different games from the prior games. They're going to look and feel and play similarly, only better. Now, the Pikmin 4 situation is what really convinced me to want to make this video. And so what happened is I made my last video discussing Pikmin 4 and the curious case, as I like to call it, around that game's 8-year silence before it was finally revealed and now ready to release, and the shadow of Tears of the Kingdom. And it was a really fun conversation to have, mostly because I'm a huge Pikmin fan and I think Pikmin 4 is going to be great. So I did want to shine a bit of a spotlight on that game with that video. But something interesting that happened was, and this was initially not a big deal, but because I made a tweet about it and then I got another response about it, that's how this thing snowballed into this video. So one of the comments on the video about Pikmin 4 that I made was somebody basically stating, and they weren't being like shitty about it. It's not that this person was being like, crappy. They just basically made a vague offhanded comment about how the game looks the same as Pikmin 3, only slightly changed and slightly better or whatever. They feel like it doesn't make sense for this to be a 10-year wait for Pikmin 4 because it looks just like Pikmin 3, only slightly different. And I shared a tweet. I kind of copied and shared an image of this conversation and this comment this person left, and I made a tweet where I said this: uh-oh, are we about to start having the same ridiculous conversations around Pikmin 4 that we were around Tears of the Kingdom? Cracking a joke about the fact that people forgot what a sequel to Breath of the Wild was supposed to look like, and are we going to start doing the same thing with Pikmin? It looks the same as the last game, only better, as if that's not what sequels are supposed to already be. And so how does this whole thing get us back to Metroid? Well, I had this really interesting response from someone named Jay Burner Plays on Twitter, who said, you already know people are going to do the same to Prime 4. And immediately, credit to this person, because it wasn't even a thought in my brain, as soon as I read it, I was like, yo, that is correct. People will totally forget that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be a sequel to Metroid Prime 3, and therefore is probably going to, in many ways, look similar to those first 3 games. And so essentially, that weird and simple chain of events brings me to the topic and what I wanted to just kind of spend a couple of minutes chatting with you guys about today. And I think it's important to maybe give a little bit of a reminder before we eventually see what Metroid Prime 4 is going to look like. Again, we might see it this year, we might see it next year, it might take longer, we don't know. You've heard me say, I think we will absolutely see Metroid Prime 4 before 2023 is over, but time will tell, no one knows yet. However, again, I want to use this discussion as a reason to remind everyone, when we finally see Metroid Prime 4, we can have some high expectations for what it's going to look like and feel like when we finally see it. It's a great series. It's known for its high quality. I'm the biggest Metroid fan in the world. I expect them to be doing some great things with this game. I expect it to look beautiful, and I'm expecting some pretty exciting looking gameplay enhancements, yes. But at the same time, similarly to Tears of the Kingdom and similarly to Pikmin 4, we should expect Metroid Prime 4, unless they're going to totally shock us and change it up, we should all be preparing ourselves for Metroid Prime 4 to look like the prior Metroid games, only with better graphics. I think the one fair expectation for us to have is for the game to look pretty darned beautiful, simply because the last new Metroid Prime game was Metroid Prime 3, 16 years ago almost, in 2007, on the standard definition Wii. Think about it. Metroid Dread 2 years ago in 2021 was the first officially released HD Metroid game. And then, of course, a few months ago, we got the fantastic Metroid Prime Remastered, which was another HD Metroid game, but of course it was a remaster and a remake of a classic Metroid game. And so if Metroid Prime 4 releases like on the Switch 2, for example, which many of us think it might, we have to remember that in that situation, Metroid Prime 3 released 2 generations prior on a standard definition console. It would have been 2007 standard definition, then there was an HD Wii U, then there was an HD Switch, then there will be the also HD and maybe even 4K Nintendo Switch 2, right? So there is a huge gap in time and a huge gap in technology between 2007's Metroid Prime 3 and whenever the hell we see Metroid Prime 4. So the graphics obviously should look significantly better than Prime 3, but the important thing to remember is outside of the graphics, it's also the gameplay. And I think that we might see a situation where Metroid Prime 4 showed, and it's going to be a much prettier looking version of what Metroid Prime 3 is. And yes, to this person's tweet, I think that we might see people who will decry this as not interesting or not significant enough of a jump. They're going to say, oh, this looks just like the older Metroid Prime games, only it's in HD. And some people might say that it looks bad or disappointing. Now, I don't want to take away anyone's right to have their own opinion on something. And of course, if something looks actually disappointing, then it's okay to say that it looks disappointing. The only point I'm trying to make is we need to prepare ourselves for Metroid Prime 4 to still look like a Metroid Prime game. Yes, we can have some graphical expectations, and maybe they let us down in that department. I don't think they will, but maybe they do. But in terms of gameplay and style and approach, you guys, it's probably going to look just like those games. And I think that anyone who simply says, oh, this looks just like the older games, and so it's not really going to feel like a sequel, that's where I think we need to keep our expectations in check. And the whole purpose of this video is to say our expectations should be appropriate for what this game is going to be. It's going to be a 2 generations removed sequel to a series of 3 games that all looked and played very, very similarly. And this, again, this isn't a new Metroid game the way Metroid Dread was new. This is a sequel to Prime 3. And so I know I'm driving this point home a lot in this conversation, but it's the kind of thing that we've seen evidence with Tears of the Kingdom and now a little bit maybe with Pikmin 4 that people are forgetting what sequels are supposed to be. This isn't going to be a complete change to Metroid Prime. It's going to be a 4th Metroid Prime game. It is going to be in first person. It is going to use similar gameplay. Hopefully there will be additional gameplay elements like melee attacks or different weird crazy things Samus can do in like a third-person mode or in Morph Ball, but it's going to look and play like Metroid Prime. I think if we look at the graphics and gameplay of Metroid Prime Remastered, or even the famous Unreal 4 tech demo for Metroid Prime, those are great examples of what I think we can expect from Metroid Prime 4. Graphics that look beautiful and a graphic style that is going to be in line with the Metroid Prime games. It's going to look better than any of the original games, of course, because of the technology, but it's also going to look and play very similarly, right? That's what I think a lot of people need to remember. And I know I could be jumping the gun by 6 months to a year. I mean, we don't know when we're going to see this game, so it's hard to time this conversation appropriately. I'm just having it now because it came up after my Pikmin 4 video. But I just hope that whenever we see Metroid Prime 4, whether it's next week or next month or next year, that everyone remembers this conversation we're having now, that we need to expect it to just look like a normal Metroid Prime game and don't expect it to look like God's gift to video games. I mean, okay, as a Metroid fan, to me it's probably going to look that way, but it's not going to be a significant change from the prior games, so I hope people's expectations are kept in check.